Welcome to So You Know. I'm Russell Conte with Sewing Arts Center. Today I'd like to instruct you on the fine art of installing a flat-felled seam. You ready? Let's get to it. Okay, the tools of the trade today. Basic fundamental things you'll need for this project: good quality pins, certainly good quality shears. You'll want 2 pieces of fabric that you've cut 6 inches by roughly 14 inches. You'll want some good quality thread. I tend to gravitate toward cotton. However, if you're not certain what kind of thread to use, a good quality polyester is always a better go-to choice. When you're also trying to pick out your needles, you want to make certain you have a needle that's appropriate to the weight of the fabric you're using. For a lightweight fabric, let's say shirt weight, you'll want a size 70. For a medium weight fabric, more like khakis, you'll want a size 80. And then when you get into denim, you'll probably want like a size 90. And then the last thing you'll need for this particular project, a little bit of school glue. We're going to show you a little trick that makes this flat felled seam a lot easier. Now, like a French seam, a flat felled seam is sewn in the same convention. It's sewn with the right sides of the fabric face out. So in this case, you're going to have the wrong sides together, which feels a little bit odd, but that's correct. Okay. What we'll do is we'll place the fabric under the foot, and our standard seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch. So we want to make certain we're sewing it at 5/8. We sew forward a few stitches, of course. We're going to back up a few stitches to anchor the edge, and sew forward again. Make certain your raw edges are matching up as you're sewing. And then reverse at the end to lock it, and then raise a foot and cut your threads. Just like that. And again, the front of my fabric, I've just labeled front so that I can differentiate it from the back in this particular instance. We're going to trim that down to 1/8 of an inch. And now we'll take it to the iron and press it. We're going to French press first. Simply bed the stitch into the fabric, both sides. We're then going to open it, press the seam allowance flat. So we're going to open up both those seam allowances and then press right into this pressed line. Sometimes holding a little bit of tension on the other end of the garment will help get right into the seam. You want to make sure you don't capture any other fabric in that seam allowance. And I tend to like to do it both sides just to make certain I'm in there nice and tidy. And finally, what we're going to do is we're going to take this longer seam allowance and we're going to roll it over the shorter seam allowance. And once we've done that, then we're going to roll it one more time. So it just basically cups the smaller seam allowance like that. Okay, and we do that the full length. Just like that. We're just going to roll that and press it. I'm going to make certain the seam allowance and the fold and the crease on here is really accurate, because this is on the outside of the garment. You're going to see that. Okay. Now, something that makes this a little bit easier is to go ahead and glue the seam allowance before we sew it. Okay. It's a little unconventional, but it works quite well. So if you use this, a little bit of school glue right along the fold, on the inside of the fold of the seam allowance, you can then press it into place and then stitch it. The glue is water soluble, so once you wash the garment, it'll wash right away. But it's the difference between instant expert and then perhaps doing it not quite as well as you had hoped you'd done it the first time. Just do that, and then put a little bit of heat to it. By virtue of that, we've dried the glue, and the seam allowance holds in place for us until we're ready to sew it. So we've pressed our seam allowance, we've glued the edge, we've rolled it to the back and ironed it in place. Now we're ready to sew again. And again, for the most part, anytime you're sewing, you want to sew from the public side of the garment. Certainly we can sew it from the back side, but sometimes the stitch line doesn't look as well because the bobbin side tends to be a little bit looser on some machines than others. So it's always going to give you a better finish and result to be able to sew from the public side. Our goal is just simply to sew as accurately as we can along this edge here, making certain that we're parallel to our first stitching line. Raise a foot, cut your threads, and your seam is concluded. There's our flat fell seam from the right side of the fabric, and that's what you'd conventionally see on a lot of garments. It's an appropriate seam finish for any fabric that is light to medium to heavy duty. You'll see it on denim quite a bit on the inside leg seam. Thank you for joining us for this edition of So You Know. Hope you enjoyed learning how to do a flat felled seam and adding a little bit more professional finish to your garments. Look forward to more videos coming very soon, and if you'd like to contact us, please feel free to do so at sewyouknow.com or sewingartscenter.com. I'm Russell Conte. Thanks very much.